guys. It was another depressing month. Do not be distracted by my admittedly very festive shirt. We are all still in the negative. It is not a party. But we live to fight another day, I suppose. Kyle, did you end up day trading any cryptos this week in an attempt to dig yourself out of a hole?
No, I
No?
should have. I don't know. Like Bitcoin seems to continue to be doing its thing, just fluctuating around high 20s, mid 30s. So maybe I should keep looking into that.
Yeah.
But this week was more about just not dying from heat stroke. To be honest, it's hot.
Yeah. Dealing with a heat wave up here in Washington, so
Oh yeah.
makes every day a little interesting when you're not used to it, and almost nobody's house has AC. Kyle, what about you? Did you do anything this week to try to dig yourself out of a hole?
No, I had kept an eye on stuff, and I was like, oh, green, and then shortly after, oh, lots of red. So, yeah. No moves for me necessarily. Yeah, I mean, I'm watching Etsy, so if I can get out of that, what is he? Well, what kind of hole do I have right now with Etsy? It's up 14% for me right now. Oh, never mind. I'm never gonna. It's it's down 10% all time, so I don't know if that's gonna come back.
Yeah, I mean, monthly, I'm amazingly only down 7.75% on Bitcoin, but that's because most of it evaporated in the month of May. All time, I'm now back in the green at 1.72%,
Ooh,
which is
big
disgusting
move.
considering I should have sold it up at 60, at least for the purposes of this competition.
Yeah.
About halved it, which is really awful. Ethereum all time is looking like not a good bet right now. I probably should still be holding Target, but you live and you learn. Welcome to the markets. Everything else though is just kind of chilling. The one thing this month that has been really good for me is Microsoft. They've been on a bit of a tear. I know they hit, what was it, $2 trillion in market cap, the second company in history to hit that. One day this last week, I don't remember which one. So all time now, what am I at? All time 12.75. So
Nice.
reasons for optimism there. Obviously not going to sell it because it's one of the only things I have right now that's green. So we're holding on for dear life there. But I believe that things are looking up, and that's actually what we're going to talk about today. Futures are indicating, the futures market is indicating that people believe the threat of immediate inflation is over. They believe that it's going to hold relatively stable. The jobs report was better than May, not as good as they were hoping, but still better than May. And consumer spending is up again. So, all of that tells me that hopefully this week and into July, things start to get a little bit more consistent. And then once we've eliminated some of these positions where we're maybe down 2 or 3% or 5 or 6%, maybe we can start to move on from some of those and find some other things. But it leads me to a question, because last week we talked about the huge demand for luxury items and whether or not that meant a lot of luxury stocks were good buys. I'm wondering what we think about all of this pent-up demand in other categories. I know we've talked a little bit about retail, but the surge in consumer spending and pent-up demand, how long do we think this can propel the market, and what sectors should we be looking at that we haven't already talked about?
Yeah, that's.
I mean, do you think it's going to last through the end of the year? Do you think it sputters out in the fall if we get any flare-ups as the weather changes? I guess that would probably be more wintertime too, but
Honestly,
I mean, what do we think?
I'm thinking there's enough pull that it goes probably through New Year,
Okay.
through the start of the New Year. Because, I mean, yeah, I guess fall is usually kind of a little bit of a downtime, right? Some people are preparing for winter holidays and stuff, like buying gifts and such. But, yeah, I mean, I think there's enough pull where some people are going to be, like the weather's pretty good. It's a little too good up here right now. Uh, Yeah, so I mean, I think people are trying to get more. People are trying to get out more. So that's
Okay.
kind of people are spending there. People are getting. I mean, some jobs are coming back. Some people are able to get out more as well, like coming into some money in some ways. So I guess maybe they're trying to also spend a bit. I feel like there's probably some pull.
Okay, so you're calling your shot through the end of the year at least.
I would think so. I would hope so. I like based off of I guess my immediate surroundings and vision of like what I'm seeing people do. I'm thinking, yeah, people are getting maybe more comfortable with going out as well. So like,
Okay.
it seems like it could be good.
So then,
Or
I guess following up on that, are you still really looking at retail then? Are there other sectors where you think this pent up demand is worth chasing in terms of investment, or where are you at?
I mean, I guess a lot of my perspective is based in just the retail kind of side. I don't know too much about other sectors really and how those are performing. But yeah, I guess I can't really say too much for other things.
Okay.
But yeah, solely in retail, it seems like it's pretty strong.
Okay. So you're calling your shot. It's going to be a big summer for retail. Kyle, what about you? How long does it last, and where does the pent up demand go next?
I think it lasts for a while too. I mean, personally, I'm still in a very spend money attitude.
Yeah.
I mean, I think most of us are.
I mean, I don't know. I guess I don't know about retail. We've talked about travel before. There's certain businesses that seem to be like in very interesting states. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of looking at like trip stuff right now, myself, and like
Mhm.
I noticed that getting a flight, hotel, whatever, that kind of stuff seemed kind of normal, like price wise in my mind. Like yeah, renting a car, it was going to be more expensive to rent a car for
Yeah.
myself than like the Airbnb I was looking at.
Yep.
So I was kind of surprised by that. I don't know what's really driving that. Like, did everyone sell all their cars in order
It's
to
a couple
offset
things,
losses?
actually. I do know the answer to this question. So, A, you are absolutely correct. When everything shut down, a bunch of these companies sold off a bunch of their fleet because they needed money to keep the lights on. B, they're having a hard time cycling into new inventory at the rate that they would normally to replenish the fleet because car makers can't get chips. And when they do get chips, the demand for cars right now is so insane that people are buying them off the lot, and the rental car companies can't get enough of them to buy for their own fleet.
I
So
see.
you've got a couple of things. They've reduced the supply, and demand has gone way up. So
Mhm.
I mean, the rental car companies, like, people are still renting them, and so the money is there. But like, logistically, like, they're completely and totally screwed. Like, you're not going to be able to replenish your fleet for quite a while.
Well, they're not, but it seems like they're charging. I mean, if people are actually paying what they're charging,
They are.
Yeah.
Then it's probably. I mean, like you only can rent out five, like a fifth of your normal size fleet, but you're charging 6 times your prices. Like, you're okay still.
No, I'm not saying that they're not okay. What I'm saying is they're missing out on what remains of the market opportunity because
Right.
they
Well,
can't
but the
fill
argument
that
would
need.
be,
It caps
if
the
they
ceiling,
had.
I guess, is what I'm saying.
Well, I guess the argument would be if they had all those cars, though, would they be able to charge like 6 times the price, maybe? Or I guess
No,
you're
but I
saying
think
like,
they would still all be rented.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, like I think if their supply was higher, they would still be able to get away with higher
a slightly
rates.
higher rate,
Yeah.
and also still get rid of all their cars. I see what you
Mhm.
mean.
Yep.
I don't disagree with that. Like I said, I feel like a lot of people want to travel. They're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
got my vaccination. Good to
But
go.
honestly, that's
Mhm.
that's why we road tripped earlier this month when we went on vacation, was because we didn't want to fly anywhere, and when we ran the numbers on what it would take to rent a car, it was obscene. Like, there's no
Yeah.
way.
So our cars just really popular. You said everyone's trying to buy a car. I didn't actually know that. I stopped
Yeah.
trying to buy a car. I was gonna try to buy a car last year, and then
I
COVID hit.
actually,
and now my job is fully remote, so I don't
Yeah.
don't really have a need to look for a car in my immediate future. I guess.
Mhm.
I was talking to my parents the other day, and we have family out in the Midwest, and they went down to look at a car lot. I think it was last week. And granted, this is the Midwest. This is not a heavily urbanized area with a large population center. They legitimately had 0 cars on the lot. It
Holy
looked like the lot was closed.
Holy shit.
And the people who are working there are like, we can show you our cars that we drive that we got from here, or you can
Yeah.
order something out of the catalog and maybe get it in August or September. Like, they
Jeez.
legitimately could not get a car to put on the lot at all.
That
It's
is
so weird. I will show you
absolutely
my car that you cannot have.
Yeah.
But like,
Well, like, even mine, like, we have one we're about to trade in because we just don't need it anymore. Like,
Mhm.
I'm hearing from people you can get like 150% or more of Blue Book for like anything that you trade in right now.
Jeez.
I actually saw it the other day because one of the most requested vehicles, Kyle, was your truck.
That's Tacoma?
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, no.
So if you're looking to get into the car flipping game, now is
Oh,
your golden
man.
opportunity.
Yeah, dude, I could. Maybe I could get into a newer one.
You might be able to. I don't know, man. The numbers I was reading the other day were just ridiculous.
That's crazy.
Like, they've counteracted most of the depreciation on a new car. Like, if you take it off the lot and it depreciates like it normally does, if you try to trade it in 2 or 3 years, like, you're taking, again, based on what I saw the other day, you're only taking like a 10% hit depending on the type of car instead of what normally would average around 30,
Yeah. You know,
which is ridiculous.
yeah, that's actually not bad.
So, but yes, Kyle, getting back to your point, I think the travel stuff is going to continue to grow. Rental car stuff, that's ridiculous. Maybe
So maybe
worth
in
a
the-
buy. I don't know what Hertz is trading at right now, but they
Well, I
are
don't know,
also in
rental
the middle of
cars or
Chapter
just-
11, if my memory serves me correctly, which is not super great.
Yeah.
well, would you do rental cars or would you do like car manufacturers in general? 'Cause you know that all these rental car companies are placing orders to refill their fleet, and apparently, I guess everyone wants to buy a car at the consumer level too. Would it not be a good investment to look into car manufacturers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the one thing that you would have to look at, and I don't know, which is why I'm phrasing this the way that I am, the margins when you manufacture a car and sell it to a dealership are probably smaller than the margins you would get from renting a car out.
I see.
Obviously, your cost structure and all of that is entirely different too, but I would guess that the rental car business is probably where I would start, just because I'm assuming the margin is much higher.
Yeah, that's true. Because I guess you purchase the car for X amount and you use it for X amount of years.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you can charge a higher rate.
Yeah. So then, speaking of cars, I couldn't help but notice the other day that the Pikes Peak race is going on, and somebody took out a Tesla Model S Plaid. Obviously, because it's Pikes Peak, it still has a bunch of aftermarket stuff on it. But they put it in the exhibition category, and it absolutely destroyed everybody. It was
Yeah,
not even remotely close. So, again, piggybacking on our conversation last week about luxury goods and how specific classes in the U.S. economy made boatloads of money in the last year, are cars like that, because the Model S Plaid does go on sale relatively soon, are cars like that legitimate competitors even for cars that we would consider in like the actual sports car or supercar like class of vehicle? If a car gets that type of performance and costs a little bit less, is that enough of a new market that we should be excited for Tesla?
I mean, I think electric cars have been there for a while. I mean, there are like $1 million supercar, all electric cars that set.
But those aren't
that
mass
record.
manufactured. You can't walk down the street and buy one of those.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, you mean just like I mean, hasn't Tesla just been doing that for a while then as like, electric sports? And there are other brands that do the same thing, like luxury brands that make their own electric sports supercars. I think it's kind of been there, in my opinion. I feel like.
I feel like the difference with the Plaid is that they finally got to a point where the performance is eye-popping enough that people are paying attention. Like, it used to be, oh, isn't it cute?
Fair.
It's an electric car that can do this thing almost like a regular car. Now it's like, look at this electric car absolutely beating the ass of the gas-powered car designed to do the same thing. I mean, am I crazy?
I guess it kind of, well, I mean, so when the Model S first came out, it was huge in that like, oh, it can out accelerate like a Lambo or Ferrari or any of those top like flat like the big brand name like pony cars.
Yeah, I mean, quarter mile, it's always going to.
Exactly. But the fact that it's Pikes Peak and there's I don't even know how many turns on Pikes Peak, like
Yeah.
that's actually wild. Because I mean, for the past few years, Pikes Peak has been dominated by electric vehicles. Sebastian Loeb, I think his name is. It's Sebastian something, whatever. That guy has been decimating Pikes Peak. Like I think he
Really?
cut like 2 minutes off of 1 year, and then again like another minute like the next year in an electric vehicle.
Oh, wow.
So like it's crazy that I mean that was a fully custom vehicle.
Yeah.
But now that like a Tesla Model S, like a basically showroom car that they're modifying, taking probably weight out. Like now that it can turn corners and stuff, like that's even cooler to someone like me, who like I don't really care about like straight line speed. I care about more corners and stuff. So that's
Well, and
actually
correct me if I'm wrong, isn't part of the issue previously with some of the electric cars is that they're really heavy?
yes, exactly, which is why they couldn't really turn that well.
No.
So yeah, I mean, if you now have the like because like before it was catering only to like one subset of like car people, but now it's like it turns and it goes fast and it out accelerates it does basically everything that a supercar would do. That's really cool. It's interesting and intriguing.
So you're buying that they've potentially tapped into a new market, and it sounds like Kyle is a little bit more skeptical.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm more interested now because for me, being someone who cares, like my car is absolutely like slow as a pig. Like if I try to accelerate onto the highway, like I'm like pinned red line, and then I shift, and I'm like, okay, I'm still going slower than the guy that I'm trying to pull on. But if you put me into a corner, my car is actually very quick.
Mm-hmm.
So like that, that's where my interests are. Like going fast is not that big a deal for me. Going in a corner quickly is what's interesting to me. So yeah, if you marry those two things together, then it's pretty cool, pretty capable car.
Okay. So
yeah,
you're
I mean,
on it. All right.
yeah. It
So then I
seems
guess the follow-up question for me is, how long before you start to see the benefits of some of this? If you're buying into the fact that they've potentially tapped a new market, how long before you start to see the benefits of that in the actual stock price? Because Tesla's always been notoriously hard to valuate. Some people want to valuate it like a car company, other people want to valuate it like a tech company. And so you get these wildly disparate numbers even to begin with. Now I feel like this potentially makes it more complicated.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's always been interest in Tesla, but like, so I guess I don't really keep up too much on them, but like, are their production numbers like good? And, because like before, for a while, if you try to buy one, they were like, hey, we don't have them, right?
Yeah, I
Or
mean,
like,
I'm not a car person,
right?
but I would say that the last production numbers I saw looked good.
Yeah. So I guess if they're not like production limited anymore, then I feel like that probably helps, right? Because I feel like there was always been interest, but for some people, it's like I just couldn't get in. Like they just wouldn't. They won't take my money, type of thing. Like
well, and I think that's the caveat. Like right now, everybody's production numbers come with an asterisk because there's A, there's a bunch of pent up demand. B, you can't get chips. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
So, within that context, I guess you're still buying that the change could be relatively short term, at least before you start to see a little bit of a jump.
Yeah.
Okay. Kyle, what do you think? Is it a long-term play at this point, or can you reap the benefits, let's say, within a calendar year? Could you reap the benefits as a shareholder of the Model S Plaid?
Probably. Within a calendar year, them starting. Probably. I mean, you'll be able to gauge what the initial interest is, and that will probably affect the price, positively or negatively. I don't know, reap the benefits. That might just be losing money, but yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, it's a release. I don't know. Maybe it'll be hard because it's going to coincide with them releasing more than one thing, right? Like the truck's coming out soon too, right?
I
So
don't
like,
remember the timeline on the truck.
I mean, 2022 is 3 years after that initial presentation, right? Or is that only was that only 2 years? Was that only a year ago?
I feel like that was a 2019 or
So that was
early
2019.
2020 video.
So it would have been 2 to 3 years after that video.
No.
Maybe I don't know. I feel like that would be kind of on timeline, but maybe they had some. Maybe that was like a 5 year out thing. That seems like a really long time to have a preview truck being showcased, but whatever. Not, not in the not in the hype building business. So
No, I mean
that
logically, I
works.
think you're probably right. It has to be on a more immediate timeline than that. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dropped it so early.
Well, it didn't work too, so maybe got pushed back a little bit. So
Perhaps. I mean, the first iPhone that they used to announce that product didn't work either. I mean, it had
it was like
it had like
just
4
programmed.
specific demo functions, and it was timed up to the speech. So if you talked for too long,
Whoa.
the demo would stop. Or you would literally like run out of the video. I think is what.
Nice.
You can go read the whole thing. You want to talk about high stakes production? Go read about how they managed to pull that off. It never ceases to amaze me. Because yeah, it did not work. But here we are. I have one sitting next to me. Funny how things change, I guess. The last big thing, though, of the week, and we're going to get back to kind of the heart of the channel a little bit more. I noticed that the SEC is wrapping up a public comment period on pretty much everything related to ESG investing, and the initial scope of inquiry from the chairman, essentially they're looking at everything. They're looking at, are companies actually following through and executing the commitments that they've made in shareholder disclosures? Are they actually effective? How are you marketing them? Are you marketing them honestly? Are you not marketing them honestly? How are you measuring all of that stuff? How are you reporting all of that stuff? I mean, since the inception of ESG, there's been a lot of controversy about, is this honest or is it greenwashing? Because even Exxon has a page on their website of like, ooh, look at all this great ESG stuff that we do. And like, the cynical person like myself is going to say, okay, cool, I really don't care. I mean, like, to a degree I do, but it does not change my perception of your brand just because of that. So what, as people who are relatively new to investing, I guess, walk me through, if there was one thing that they could do to help demystify, like, what on earth is ESG and how do I know if a company is good at it? What is that item for you?
I don't know, probably like a more regular set of metrics to measure by, which is hard because there's so many different industries. So like,
Yeah.
how would you rate? But like something general enough that you can use it to compare companies again, because like the companies always say very specific things to their, whatever makes them sound good. Like, it's a very specific statistic.
Yeah, I mean, that's what PR
something,
and marketing is for.
or it's worded away by saying like, we saved this many trees or something specific, because that sounds better than however much energy and like actual joules or whatever that is. I don't know, like it seems like if you just had like one set of regulated statistics that you measured across, you would have a better idea of, is this company good at what they say they do, or or are they bad at it? But
Yeah.
I don't know what that set of statistics would be, so I don't really know how you would ask for that, right?
I mean, I think there's a certain set of universal outputs you could at least use as a benchmark, right? I mean, emissions, every company has emissions. The scope of those emissions and the types of those emissions are obviously going to vary wildly. But as an umbrella, I think you've got stuff you could work with there. Energy consumption would be another one, obviously related to emissions, but
like, how would you measure emissions for a company like Uber? Like, so their servers, like, like their actual infrastructure to run the app, that has some sort of footprint, right? Like, those are computers that exist and use electricity and whatever. But then they have end drivers, which is constantly changing. And those drivers drive their cars, not always for Uber, but sometimes for Uber. Like, how do you how do you calculate that company's emissions?
Mm.
Do you have to have their app track like, okay, this guy had this car and he drove this many miles that were paid for, like he was paid for this many miles by Uber, so those, I guess that's what we say he was driving for the company for. The time in between doesn't count, maybe, I don't know. So you have to like calculate for every person and for every car that they had that they drove, like what the
Well,
what the
and I'm
emission
really
was for
glad
that
that you're
person, and you
using
add
this.
everyone up.
Yeah, I'm glad you're using this as an example because that perfectly underscores why this is so damn complicated. In the case of somebody like Google, I think what you track it back to, or I should say, what people have started to track it back to, in an attempt to move towards some type of standard, is going to be, okay, if a server farm for Google requires X amount of electricity, where did that electricity come from and how was it generated? Did it come from a hydroelectric dam? Did it come from coal? Did it come from natural gas? And so they're measuring the emissions that were required to generate the electricity. In the case of a company like Uber, that obviously gets a little complicated because you only want the emissions while somebody was driving for Uber, but whether or not you can appropriately track that with the level of granularity required, maybe you bank on a computer simulation based off of like the lifespan of all of Uber's driver data on what is the quote unquote average. I don't know.
Like it's messy. Who makes that? Who makes that algorithm? If it's Uber, do you trust Uber's algorithm? Like,
Well,
like,
and
our
that's part
drivers
of
use this much emissions. Like, yeah, then you get to like the car scandals, right? The companies are testing themselves for their emissions, and they're
VW.
like, yeah, our cars emit a level of gases that pass our tests. Like, so Uber develops an algorithm that approximates the emissions by their drivers, and it comes out to some number that makes Uber look good, I guess.
Yeah.
And then, like, just even if we had a way to calculate it, you would have to just know, like, like Uber's gonna always have a bad score in emissions. Like, it's just by the nature of their product. Like, so, like, would you have, like, is that okay? Like, like you'd have, I guess you'd have to compare them to like other, like, similar services, right? Only because like otherwise you couldn't compare them to like, some random like shoe company or something. Like the shoe company might have a terrible human rights store because they have sweatshops in some undocumented third world country, but they don't really make that many emissions. So
well, and this is where I think it's important to remember too that the objective is not necessarily to say that a company is good or bad at something. The objective is to present the information in a way that's factual and easy to understand and to allow the individual to make that choice, right? Because to your point, if somebody's really passionate about the gig economy and ride sharing obviously being a huge part of that, maybe if Uber has the best, quote unquote emissions of all of the rideshare companies that they can invest in, maybe for them they still view that as a good choice where somebody else may not. And so, obviously to your point, it gets extremely complicated. But I think that's part of the reason why it's important that they're looking at this holistically and saying, how do we create an environment where we can regulate and communicate about what is actually happening? Because we know that we can't trust the company to do it honestly. There's plenty of examples of that not going particularly well. But obviously you don't want the government being too heavy-handed with it either. And so there's got to be some give and take in terms of what matters, how do we make sure that it's being done correctly. But at the end of the day, the end choice is always going to be with the investor or the institution who has to look at that data and make a choice. But to your point, I do think the standardization of that is going to be a huge component of making this a more integral part of everybody's investing behavior, right? You're not going to buy into stuff that you don't understand. If this helps them understand it, then that changes. So, Kyle, what about you?
I don't know. I mean, it's just like, for me, I guess I would like some type of baseline to compare to, but how do you, they're so, like, everyone is so different in the way they produce things, or like, not every company runs the same way. So it's like, how do you form that baseline?
Yeah. And the problem with like a baseline is even if you came up with like a baseline per industry, I'm sure industries would start seeing that as like regulate, like that leads to quote unquote regulation,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, like the
It's like
government,
indirect.
now that there's a target, the government can start saying like, well, these companies are bad, or like,
Yeah.
like, or like we're gonna impose fines on these companies if
Yeah.
they start, and then that will get pushed back from any pro business
Right.
politician. So that's a
Well, and
large
I think
group.
it gets even more complicated when you consider, like, okay, if you look at something like the Paris Climate Agreement, where some companies have decided to follow that regardless of whether the country they're registered in is doing it or not. Well, in that case, the benchmark is going to be moving.
Right.
And so if you establish a benchmark now, the only value of that benchmark is relative to the benchmark they're supposed to be shooting for. So, like, as a measurement of progress, I think a benchmark could potentially be valuable. But a benchmark in and of itself, to your point, I think creates an environment that could get problematic really quickly.
Yeah. I guess, but like, what if, I guess if we gave companies like a leeway, maybe 5, 6 years or something, right? Start gathering data, start collecting data, because some companies are not collecting this data or whatever.
Yeah, that's true too.
And then maybe create a baseline on themselves and see like a progress chart. But at the same time, like, so then that way you're not comparing between companies, and then
What if you're a company that's already doing good then? Like, what if you're like, I was doing good before I was regulated or before I was monitored, so now it just looks like I'm doing nothing.
I'm
So
just
that's 'cause I was
I'm
already
average.
good. Yeah, like it's gonna be tough. Like you'd have to, then you would still need to do kind of like that kind of comparison. Like, well, they haven't improved, but like the level they're at is still really high comparatively. I guess so. Whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you could make the argument too that if you've already been doing it, then you're already reaping the benefits of whatever performance efficiencies you've built into that. Mm-hmm. If you use less energy, you spend less on it. There's some of those built-in efficiencies that you can leverage a little bit more if you've actively been tracking some of this already. But I mean, when we first started this, how many companies did we look at before we bought into this? Like, oh, I want their ESG information, but they don't have any. Mm-hmm. Or the last one they have is from 2017. Or the only ESG data they have is a one-page PDF that looks like some poor marketing intern had to put it together so that the entire company doesn't look bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's not even a universal starting point in terms of what information are we publishing and what does it mean.
Right. Because it's not like you can even really say, like, these are key metrics that you need to gather. Like, every company is going to have different different metrics on that. So it's like, it's so hard to standardize, I guess.
What if a company says they can't measure too?
Right.
Like, it costs money to calculate or to have the tools to calculate some of these things that we're talking about. What if they're just like, yeah, we can't afford to do that as a business, make us go under? Like, can the government force you to, like, spend part of your budget on regulations like that? I mean, like, the government can for safety reasons, right? Like, you say, like, you have to pass safety inspections to build buildings. You can't just build buildings for profit just because. But like, would ESG become something like that? Is protecting the planet on the level, is that like, on the same level? Like, well, I mean, it's not just the planet, right? ESG, it's the E part, the S and the G, those are people problems, right? Human-centric problems. So, like, do those become things that, like, that you can look into, like, in that way?
Yeah, and I mean, I think the human-centric problems, too, is a very different conversation because those introduce their own complexities about how do we measure these things and how do we actually hold people accountable to them. Like the conversation we had last week about board diversity, right? Like, yes, we know that board diversity needs to create more opportunities for women and people of color. But how do we do that in a way that doesn't, I guess for lack of a better word, treat people like even more of a commodity than they already are? It's like companies are already treating people as fairly expendable resources. And so if you put a benchmark in that you have to have X percent of people that represent these other things, like, yes, you need to do that. But how do we control it so that that is done responsibly?
Right.
Because I mean, anything that you do there has to be more about protecting the employees than it is the company, right? If you're going to do any of that stuff, if you're going to report on any of your wages or diversity or opportunity, this or whatever, like, first and foremost, you have to protect the employee. The company is ancillary. Whereas if you look at, the environmental related problems of that, yes, the company is ancillary, but the environment is a very different conversation and a very different scenario, because the environment is also comprised of people, but the environment is also comprised of a lot of other really complex systems that people do or don't understand particularly well. So, I guess long story short, this perfectly underscores why all of this is so damn complicated to begin with. But we should at least be encouraged that they're reviewing all of it. It looks like they're going to take a pretty holistic view at how do we actually do all of this properly. And we'll see what comes of it. But I'm optimistic that it will at least be a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we got to do something, right? The way that it is now is a mess.
Yeah.
But if it weren't a mess, I don't know that we would be here. So there's that too. Well, alrighty, guys. End of the month is midweek, I believe. Let me pull up my calendar because I have no idea what day anything is anymore.
It's like Wednesday? It's the last day.
So, week ends on Wednesday, or the month ends on Wednesday. Goodness. Any last moves for 3 days, or are you going to ride it out at this point?
I don't know. It's not really great taking all these losses, but I guess I'm taking the least losses, so maybe that's okay. I don't know.
Yeah.
Although that's not a strategy that's ever going to get me back into contention, so I think I probably have to make some moves. I don't know. But I'll have to figure it out.
I keep telling myself I'll be a lot more aggressive when I can get out of some of these more longer held positions and develop a strategy that's a little bit more hands-on. I just haven't done it yet. Like,
what are you looking to get at? Well, Tesla was up a little bit. Like
and that's the thing. Like, I need some things to be in the green in order to actually, like, I don't want to just reset my portfolio by eating a bunch of losses. Like, that's not helpful long term. At least it doesn't feel helpful, I should say. It's all fake money, so I suppose it really doesn't matter that much, but that's me. Kyle, what about you? Anything else for the last 3 days?
I don't know where I would start, honestly. Everything's kind of like everything's either doing pretty well or doing absolutely terribly.
Not much of a middle ground right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe if I can kind of get out from under Bitcoin a little bit, maybe I pop out of that one. Because I did take a bit of profit earlier, and then I took a fat loss.
Yeah.
And then Ethereum, honestly, I want to see how big that negative number can get. It's so bad. Whoa, my screen is so orange right now.
I think it gets better, honestly. I wouldn't worry too much.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sitting at a nice negative 78% on Ethereum.
Oof.
So
that is a large number.
Yeah, if I can hit the negative triple digits on it, I will be impressed. But also very sad. I don't think it's going to drop that much, but I guess we'll see.
I mean, technically, if you got to triple digits, that would mean it was at 0, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, actually, that's true.
I don't think that's possible. I mean, I suck at math. I failed college calculus, so don't come to me with your math questions. But if you lose 100% of what you put into something, wouldn't that leave you with 0?
I think that's true in this case, right? Because he's not using leverage of any kind.
Yeah,
just buying.
He's not trading on margins or.
Yeah,
there's nothing else coming in from anywhere.
True.
Negative 78. That is the.
It's pretty bad.
Is that the highest number we've had so far?
I don't know. GameStop was pretty high up there. Actually, I think I sold it. I think GameStop peaked at a bigger negative, but I don't think I sold it at that big of a negative because I did wait for it to bounce back a little bit above 100 at least before selling it, before I finally eating that loss. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, how much did you put into it? I think that's the main difference, right? Like you put what into Ethereum?
I don't actually recall.
Because I put like $100,000 into
I think I did.
$100,000 into GameStop. So I was
Yeah, I
just
think-
like, when I was doing it, it only let me allocate in 10% blocks because I
Yep.
guess I was a free
Increments.
user. So I was like, well, I want to do GameStop because I feel like we should talk about it. So I guess
Yeah.
I'll throw $100,000 at GameStop. That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I think I did.
Because I remember trying to do like some small amount. I was like, this will be a tokenary gesture, and I was like, well, I guess tokenary gestures are just all or nothing in this app. So
Yeah, I
So-
think I did 100K into Ethereum. So yeah,
nice.
Oof.
not looking super hot.
I'm optimistic on that one. I wouldn't panic.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, okay, with that big of a number, I'm still sitting in second place for the month. I'm currently negative 26 for the month on Ethereum. Negative 27 now.
I mean, I'm like up on Ripple still all time, but I'm minus 44% on Ripple this month.
Holy.
This
Wow.
month I'm minus 44%. So that means Austin is minus 44% on Ripple. I mean, he's still up like 20% probably total. but-
Yeah. Is that the biggest negative percentage we've had on a month in a 1 month period?
I don't know. It's pretty fat. I don't
It's a
know.
big
Last month there were some ugly crypto
Yeah.
crypto percentages too that I don't.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean the biggest negative I have this month is 27%,
Oof.
which is still awful. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. Not a number you want to see.
All right. Well, it sounds like everybody's holding still for now, but if things
Yeah.
tick up in July, it could get pretty interesting because we're nearing the halfway point, at least in the competition, and we'll know where everybody stands, and I feel like the pressure is going to start to get to all of us as we try to not lose. So
Mm-hmm.
should be interesting. Best of luck as always, and this time next week we'll see who won, who lost, and at least have a couple of days worth of data for the month of July. So we'll see what happens.
Definitely.
Later.
Yeah, take care.
All
guys.
right. See you guys.